And greeting, Cap fans, and welcome to the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast, episode number 1. I am your host, Rick Verbanis, and I am joined by my partner, Bob Lucius. Bob, how are you doing today?
Good, Rick. How are you doing today?
I'm excited. I'm excited to get this rolling. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while, so we're finally here.
Me too. Let's get rolling.
Yeah, so we started with the Facebook group. So for those who haven't been to the Facebook group or are aware of it, if you go into Facebook and just do a search for Captain America Comic Book Fans, you'll come across this really cool group that we've had since, I want to say going back to April when the pandemic started. And I guess maybe a little bit about the history of the Facebook group first. So I found myself back when the pandemic started with a little bit more time, and I found myself spending more time in my man cave, surrounding myself with things that brought me joy, a little bit of zen, some peace, namely my comic books and memorabilia, and specifically a lot of Captain America stuff. Apparently, it's how I deal with stress in escaping to a simpler time. And really, it's, I guess, the power of nostalgia, right?
That's right, Rick. I mean, I don't think you're alone in that regard. I think there's a lot of us out there that feel the same way and do the same sorts of things to sort of relax and recenter. And I think that's why so many folks have found their way to that group.
Yeah, I agree. So and also at the beginning of the pandemic, I had a little bit more time, extra time. So I finally got around to doing something I've wanted to do for a long time, and that was create a Facebook group where Cap comic book fans could get together and chat about Cap comic books. I mean, if I'm dealing with the challenging times like this, there has to be others, right? So I found there was plenty of Facebook groups dedicated to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU, and Chris Evans, which, listen, they're great. Love the MCU and think Chris Evans is a phenomenal Captain America. Enjoyed the movies immensely. And continue to, the other series they've got coming out. But when I started this group, I wanted something that was really dedicated to the comic books, something where we could talk about, the issues and the creative teams and fun stuff like that. So I started this group. Like I said, if listeners want to find it, they can either go to our anchor page, which we have linked, or they can just go to Facebook and search it. And in the beginning, I used to recruit every Cap fan I found on Facebook in the dozens of groups that I belong. So, some comic book buy and sell groups, discussion groups, and the group started growing. We got all kinds of fans like you and I on it, but you know what? It's Bob, what's really cool? We got plenty of creators that joined as well, right? So we got creators that were for Captain America series, and then just other creators who were fans of Captain America. Some of these were some really fun teams, like back in the 80s, it was Mike Zeck and John Beatty and Bob Sharon, they're all part of the group. Mike Perkins from Ed Brubaker's Winter Soldier run, Tom Morgan from the John Walker Cap run that Mark Gruenwald did. You know what, Bob, we even have Captain America himself. We have actor Reb Brown from the 1979 Cap movies.
That's right, and he's not only just a sort of a member; he is an active participant. He's on there a lot, commenting and yeah, it's really pretty cool.
Yeah, what's funny is I had a birthday a few months ago, and I got a birthday greetings from Reb Brown. So, which was so surreal. I mean, if you would have talked to, little Rick back in 1979 when he was doing those made for TV movies, that one day Captain America be wishing you happy birthday, I would have never believed it in a million years. But so it's really cool.
Right. And I got to tell you, I've learned so much from that group. I mean, I've gotten a lot of personal satisfaction because it really is a tremendously supportive and just kind of a reaffirming group of guys and gals in that group. But I have learned so much, not just about the comics and the creative teams behind Captain America, but just some of the other things too, like statues and other collectibles and original art. I mean, these are things that, quite frankly, I never really entered the orbit of my thinking before. But it's really broadened my appreciation for Cap as sort of the American monomyth.
Yeah, and not to mention, all these different things that are now we're learning about them and are like, wow, I never knew. I always wanted this.
Exactly. Yeah, it's expensive, but yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was funny. The group grew. I mean, in less than 6 months, we got to 1,000 members, and then 6 weeks later, guess what happened, Bob?
Tell me, Rick. Tell me what happened.
We got to 2,000 members. It was just gangbusters, right? So I started thinking, how do we take this to the next level? And here we are. It's the Captain America Comic Book Fans podcast. That's kind of the origin of how we got here.
Yeah. And we're going to have, this podcast is going to have some really great content. We're going to look at a lot of different story arcs. Some of them are very familiar, like the Bloodstone Hunt. And some of them may not be so familiar to a lot of our listeners. Some of them will maybe come from not the main volumes of Captain America, but some of those one-off series or limited series or some of the standalone books along the way. So there's going to be a lot of interesting content that we're going to explore. And we're going to have some great guests as well. As you mentioned earlier, we've got a lot of the creative talent that contributed to Cap over the years, but also, some creators out there that maybe they didn't work on Cap books, but are big fans nevertheless. And so there's going to be a lot of interesting things that we're going to explore in the months ahead.
Yeah, and also I would add that we're going to just have some philosophical discussions about Cap, I think, too, right? I mean, you and I kind of lean that way.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to ask yourself, what would Cap do?
Right.
And I mean, I know he's a fictional character, but one of the things that we love about Cap, not yes, he is quite the strategic thinker and a great leader and an excellent fighter and all that. But you know what? He's the moral center of the Marvel universe. He's the North Star. No Alpha Flight reference there, but he's the guiding principle, I think, of the Marvel universe. So why not? Why not sometimes just say, well, what would Cap do in this situation?
That's right. The philosopher Mark White talked about Cap being an exemplar of virtue ethics, and sometimes that can result in some clear-cut decisions in the storylines, but sometimes it can create challenges in the real world. And so I think that's what makes Cap so interesting. Even as he's evolved over the last 80 years, he has sort of maintained this central core of virtue and morality. And that's something I think we're going to enjoy exploring. And I hope the listeners enjoy exploring it along with us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're talking about what's going to be happening in the podcast. But I guess to the listeners, why listen to Rick and Bob? Why, like, what's their background? What brings them to be, Cap expert? So I don't know, Bob, tell us a little bit about what got you into Cap. What's your humble origin story with him?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I'll be the first guy to admit that I am not an expert at Cap. Cap's appeared in over 10,000 stories, over 5,000 books have featured Cap in them. So it's, I'd be hard pressed to point to anyone who would be an expert in that bulk of material. But both of us, I think, have spent our lives sort of looking at Cap as sort of, as you said, a moral exemplar and somebody that we could, learn a lot from, even though it's a fictional character. I remember the first time that I stumbled across Captain America, and it was, years and years ago. I think it was the summer between 7th and 8th grade for me, and I had recently made two new friends, Chris and Ron, and they got me involved in all kinds of things that I hadn't really thought of before. Initially we were into James Bond, and then they told me about a comic book store that had opened in the next town over from where we lived in Massachusetts. And I'd never been to a comic book store. I hadn't even read a comic book. But one afternoon that summer, we decided to ride our bikes down to that comic book store, and they'd been there before. I hadn't. And I just remember walking into that place and just being overwhelmed by the covers, all the color and the characters, books on the racks and books in boxes. And I was just like dumbfounded. But I remember very, very clearly looking on the rack, and there it was, Captain America 250, Cap for President. And
oh, very nice, John Byrne.
Right. And I remember picking up that book, and I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. And at the time I was a really patriotic, idealistic young man. I ended up going off in the Marines and spending almost 2.5 decades in the Marine Corps. But at that point, I was like super patriotic, and so this red, white, and blue costume really appealed to me. And so I remember I grabbed that, and I grabbed some other books, and then I flipped through some of the old books in the boxes, and I saw a copy of Captain America 104, and that cover really appealed to me as well. So I grabbed that, and I have both of those Cap books to this day. But I went home and I read that book. And man, it hit all the right notes for me. I mean, it was patriotism, it was morality, it was ethics, it was self-sacrifice. It was all the things that in my dreams of serving my country someday, they just sort of resonated with me. And I stuck with Cap ever since. And, I'll be honest with you, I am a collector of Cap. I am a reader of Cap. I'm a thinker about Cap. But I'm not all that interested in just about any other character. I haven't really collected other comic book characters. I haven't really followed other comic book characters. I mean, it's been Cap for me my whole life. And then when my son was born, just about 11 years ago, I said, I need to get back into collecting. And because I had sort of fallen off the wagon a bit over the years that I've been traveling around the world for the Marines. And I was retired, and I had a son, and I said to myself, I'm going to start collecting again, start reading again, get back into this, because this is something I want to share with him. This is a love that I want to pass down to my own son. Because again, I think even though I've evolved over the years in my thinking and my philosophy, and there's no better exemplar of what it means to be a good person and a good man and a good patriot than, I think, Captain America. And that's something every generation can learn from.
Yeah, you really bring up a great point there, right? I mean, yeah, we as adults change over the course of our lifetime, right? We mature, we have our life experiences. But one of the things that coming back to the character of Captain America and Steve Rogers specifically, right, is that while he has changed with the times, he certainly has over the course of the decades, his moral center hasn't changed, right? That part still remains the same. And that's something I think I find really appealing about the character, that, no matter what obstacle he faces, he still stays true to that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I think that's one of the things that's most interesting about Captain America, right? I mean, we're talking 80 years of history, 80 years of content with different creative teams. But we can all sort of take something from Cap. And we see a lot of debate about, whether this was a good action or a bad action, and whether this was a good story arc, or it adequately reflected or accurately reflected Steve Rogers' persona. But that's a strength, I think, of the character, because as you note, he has evolved over the years. Different cultural contexts have brought out different aspects of the Captain America character, whether it's World War II, whether it's the Civil Rights Movement, whether it's the Vietnam era, whether it's Nixon, whether it's the Patriot Act and the Bush administration. There is a dynamic that continues, but it centers on Cap's ethical core and how he negotiates the current context of where he is. And I think that's what's most interesting. And that's not something that you find in a lot of other characters, and it's what makes him continually relevant. Yeah. And Rick, what about, I mean, you've got a huge Cap collection. I mean, what era or eras really sing to you?
It's a great question. Maybe I'll start with, I guess, my introduction to Cap, right?
Yeah.
So over the decades, so I am proud to say that I do have a full Captain America collection from 100 to now, and then last year or maybe the year before, I finished getting the Tales of Suspense 58 through 99, and so I think it was a couple years ago I got my Grail. I got Avengers #4, and a few other important issues like Strange Adventures 114 and Sergeant Fury I think 13 and a few others. So yeah, that was my introduction to Captain America and sticking with it. Now, I'm not a completist. Like I'm not someone who has every single one shot and annual and miniseries and variant cover and things like that. And for those Cap fans out there, God bless you. I tip my hat. That is amazing. And I don't have any golden age. So that's I think I made a conscious effort, a decision I should say, that okay, I can go now that I've completed my Cap run, I can either start to go to the golden age or I can get some original art of some of my favorite comics. Both not exactly the cheap route. So I decided to go the original art, and we could talk about that more on a different episode. But that was my beginning. That's kind of my Cap collection, and then of course like many of us, I've added some memorabilia over the years, a few things in there, and so it's been a lot of fun.
It's funny when I hear your story. It reminds me the other day I was in some other Facebook group. I think it might have been one of the Marvel Silver Age groups, and somebody had written a comment that they'd never been a fan of Cap, and I was dumbfounded. I know maybe I'm biased, and maybe I'm just hanging out with a group that sort of changes or affects my perspective. But I was like, how can you not be a fan of Cap? It blew my mind. But then again, here we are, right?
I got to tell you something about that, right? So when we go back to when we were kids, right? So comic books weren't cool, right? I mean, thank God for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Comic books are cool, the characters are cool, but back then, comics weren't. And so, we were the comic nerds, the comic geeks. But you know what? There was a hierarchy within comic nerddom, okay? Right? and Cap fans were at the bottom of that hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
The guys that loved Wolverine and the X-Men,
yeah.
Batman, Punisher, they're like, Cap, oh, he's a Boy Scout. He's a goody two-shoe, man. So we were getting kind of mocked by our own tribe, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And so it really does my heart good to the last decade to walk around and see kids, teenagers, adults with the Cap shield on their t-shirt, their sweatshirt, right, their hat, and it's like, yeah, Cap's cool. It took me a long time to get here, but Cap's finally cool. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and one of the really cool things that we've done in the group is we've had a couple giveaways, right? And as part of those giveaways, we've asked participants to share with us what Cap means to them, and I'm just blown away every time we do one of those giveaways because lots of folks usually participate, but it just really, it moves me when I see what Cap has meant to people in their lives, not only when they were kids, but as they were growing up, as they were dealing with adversity, as they were dealing with loneliness, as they were dealing with the struggles of their own lives, what the character of Cap has meant to them in terms of an exemplar of strength and morality and virtue ethics. And so, yeah, I'm proud to be in that Cap tribe, and I know you are as well.
Yeah, no, I love it when you do those giveaways, and those are all you. So I salute you for that. But the responses that we get, yeah, it is. It's a good feeling. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, so we're going to have a lot of fun. I think talking with with members here in the group, right? So if people want to reach out to us, they could do it via the Facebook group, or they could go to our Anchor website, and there is a place on there to click on and leave a voice message. And who knows, maybe we'll play your message here and talk about, whatever topics that you want to talk about. So check that out.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of upcoming topics, Rick, what do we got coming up on the next podcast?
Well, we're going to finally get into stop talking about us and get into actual comic books, right? So, I was thinking we could talk about Steve Rogers being brought back into the Marvel universe with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Maybe maybe even before we do that, we'll talk about Strange Adventures 114 and how that was like the pilot, right, to get Cap back in the Marvel universe. And then let's explore Avengers #4. I mean, it's been a while since I've read that, and would love to review that.
Yeah, no, I've picked those books up recently, and I got to tell you, some of those first appearances from the Silver Age, whether it's the Strange Tales or Sergeant Fury 13, and of course Avengers 4 are some of the most stirring covers. I've got 2 of those displayed here in my man cave, just because when I look at them, it just sends a thrill up my leg. And so I'm really excited to have the opportunity to sort of explore those in a little bit more depth with you and talk about what they meant for bringing Cap back into the modern world.
We're also going to have our first guest in the next episode. We're going to have Jesse Simon join us. And if that name kind of sounds familiar, that's because Jesse Simon is the grandson of Joe Simon, who is the co-creator of Captain America with Jack Kirby back in 1940s. So we're going to have Jesse on to talk about his grandfather and maybe share some stories about that time when Cap was in World War II and those issues, and maybe kind of explore what it was like to see Steve brought back and a little bit of a retcon there, and maybe get some of his feelings on that too. So it'll be a lot of fun. We'll have Jesse on and at episode #2.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that because Jesse's a young guy, but this is a guy that is absolutely in love with his granddad's legacy and has really gone above and beyond to try to preserve it and share the love so that others can come to appreciate everything that Joe contributed to the comic world, not just the Cap legacy. So that's going to be a great show.
All right. Well, this was a real fun episode. I think our first episode went really well. I guess you could call this our origin episode or our first appearance, whatever comic book term you want to throw out there. And so we look forward to doing more. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, preferably 5-star, on any of the platforms you listen to. And please subscribe. We'd love to share our episodes with you whenever they come out. And we'll see you on the Captain America Comic Book Fans Facebook group, and we can kind of continue our conversation there. And don't forget, you can always go to our Anchor page and leave us a message, and maybe we'll play it here on the next podcast. So, Bob, it's been fun, and we'll catch everybody next time.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.